Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 28th episode of Coffee with Ashish, Season 2. And today we've got a very special guest with us today, Deepak Mavinkurve, who's the founder and CEO of Capsula. He's a serial entrepreneur and an early stage investor determined to revolutionize the way travel and hospitality industry operates. Uh, as most of you are aware of, Capsula is the India-based analytics startup, which is very well known. And Deepak, he donned the hat of a serial entrepreneur. He's got deep understanding of more than 2 decades of the travel and hospitality space. Uh, Capsula was founded to revolutionize the approach of how hotel and travel industry operates to increase its revenues. And in a short span of just 3 years of operation, Capsula has won multiple national and international awards for innovation in hospitality analytics. Deepak also co-founded TravelGuru.com and grew the company to become the leader in India's largest hotel network. Around 2006, it was started, then it got acquired by Travelocity in 2010. Then again in 2012, TravelGuru, as part of the business, was sold to Yatra.com. And he has been involved right from the scratch at TravelGuru.com, where he was responsible for creating the new business category in India, besides directly being involved in the product strategy and technology. Deepak, apart from work, also likes to spend his leisure time spending time in his passion, which includes reading and sports. A keen sportsman, he has represented the state and university in table tennis and was also a national level bronze medalist. So multiple feathers to his cap. With this, a very warm welcome to you, Deepak, on our show Coffee with Ashish. And I would like to request Ashish to invite you and have a conversation with you while I sit back and enjoy my coffee.
Thank you, Karthik. Thank you for the very glowing introduction. It's a privilege to be here and good to be with Ashish. I've known him for years now. It's always nice to talk to him.
Yes, good to have you here today, Deepak. And Karthik, unless you've suddenly moved into a different time zone, both Deepak and I, it's afternoon for us. Okay, coming back, joke aside. Yeah, Deepak and I mean, for the audience and for you, we do go back a long way. We tried to do something very revolutionary, which perhaps was ahead of its time when I was CEO for Reliance Retail, is to get via Travel Guru, perhaps, the hotel distribution channel working in the Reliance stores. We did sort of connect into it. We did make a pilot out of it. But like I said, I think we were ahead of its time in those days of 2006, 2007, perhaps it would have been. And today, when people want to talk about retail and distribution, that's exactly what they're talking now. But we'll come back to later. So Deepak, welcome, of course. Good to see you, buddy. And let's talk. I mean, how do you say this? Is it Capsula or is Cap SLA first? Let's start that. Because you got SLA in bold.
Yes. So before that, Ashish, just wanted to tell you, on my mobile, I still have you as Ashish Reliance. So,
okay. Put few alphabets in front and say Ashish Reliable.
Makes sense. No, it's Capsula. So Capsula is an acronym for Key Performance Scores and Lexical Analysis.
Right,
so yeah, SLA kind of means both of those things. So it's score and lexical analysis, but it's also important from a hotel's perspective that we help them track their SLA as well.
Right. So let's deep dive into it. What does it stand for, the relevance for travel, tourism, and hospitality industry, as you see it today and as you see it tomorrow?
Going forward, sure.
Yeah.
So so like what Karthik said, 2006 and my background in the hotel hospitality industry, I've been very fortunate to kind of see the evolution of the industry from those register books to extranets to channel managers and where we are today, right? This has kind of helped me understand how are hotels distributing their content effectively, what are the problem areas, etc. around that. So after kind of my logical end to the Travel Guru, Travelocity, Yatra journey, when I wanted to do something new, one of the things that kind of stuck me was if you look at the hotel industry at that time and compare it to, let's say, how the airline industry was in, let's say, the 90s, late 90s and early 2000, a large part of the cost of the ticket or the cost of the room was going into distribution costs. So 25-30% of the cost that airlines used to pay then or hotels pay now was going into distribution costs. And then you needed a maverick like a Captain Gopinath to come and
Yes.
change the industry in India, or it was, much earlier the Southwest Airlines, the Herb Kettner, or the Ryanairs in Europe who did that. So the idea was, how do we kind of build that ecosystem in India, especially considering that if you look at a typical hotel in India, let's say a 40-room property, and you break down the sales and where they're getting their sales from, at a 60-70%, I'm talking largely about pre-COVID days, right? 60-70% of occupancy, looking at, online travel agents, offline travel agents, etc. The hotel probably has an ability to convert about 5% of that inventory. So in a 24-room sale that happens, they probably convert 1.5 to 2 rooms. And to add to that, they have the balance 40% or 35%, which is 16 odd rooms that are uh, available to be sold, and they're not able to sell it. So the idea at that time was, how do we help hotels uh, use those 16 rooms or that 35% and help them sell it, considering that there was the aspirational India, much more online savvy, did not need a lot of help in terms of research, knew what they wanted. How do we help them get to selling directly, saving that 25-30%? So that was the idea. So with that as a background, we put in a whole lot of solutions. Kepsla was one of those B2B solutions. We also had a B2C and a corporate travel solutions, but Kepsla itself has become large enough for us to focus on now. So that's kind of the problem that we wanted to solve for the industry.
Right.
Now,
Go
yeah.
on.
Yeah. So what do we do is basically, there is a customer who is passing through that entire journey of from inspiration to research to booking to experience and advocacy that happens in their life cycle of travel. So we wanted to see what are those places that we could focus on to help the hotel from the start to the end. And of course, the booking phase is something that we didn't want to get into, because there were stalwarts in the business, the large OTAs, etc., that we didn't have the wherewithal to kind of compete with. So we said there are these other places available where we could contribute to helping the hotels to get direct booking. So today, what Kepsla can do is to be part of the journey of the traveler from the perspective of the hotel, from inspiring the traveler to travel, to helping them research about the hotel, to helping them improve their experience while in the hotel, and then the advocacy of the good or the bad that they enjoyed. So that's the kind of the journey that we are from a traveler perspective, and that perspective is what we give to the hotel.
Right. Very interesting. I mean, Deepak, if I may add to what you're saying, in the air capacity, viewers would know that in the early 90s, the GDS came into existence. And from the early 90s to today, 2021, they have invested billions and billions of US dollars in evolving their technology and the hosting and distribution, and to make air into a very standardized kind of distribution. And even then, if you look at it, people and distributions and consumers have found tremendous gaps in those areas. And that's how NDC came across, when IATA got NDC into it.
Yeah.
And today, of course, if you look at a pure play, even in, leave aside the LCCs, which are now forming, be it Navitaire or be it their own platforms. But if you look at it, people are finding gaps in the existing APIs which GDS gives across. So there are algorithms still to be building, there are analytics still to be building, even in the air. So the point I'm trying to make, that the hotel, of course, as you would know, and nobody would know it better, has been in a very nascent stage. And I am now looking ahead to think from people like you who do this and many more, that there is a tremendous elbow room in the hotel space if you want to match up to the air distribution route. and make the hotel distribution, forget about whether you're able to book directly on a hotel distributed, those are pure transaction. But if you have to reach the level of air inventory capacity, search, pricing, analytics, I think you got another 10 to 12, 15 years perhaps ahead, if not more. I don't know. I'm just guessing. I'm dreaming.
uh, yeah, I mean, Moore's law, I don't think you need 10 to 15 years. You need it would happen much faster, according to me. And I think there is a lot of investment that is coming into innovation in hotel distribution and hotel technology. There are some very smart companies who are doing some very interesting things. So it should happen faster than you expect.
Right. Right. So, I've always called the COVID as the chief transformation officer. It made us do things which in an ordinary capacity travel industry folks wouldn't have done. So, and COVID itself and the virus itself has sort of surprised us. You and I were chatting, of course, prior to the show. When it started in March, or rather February of 2020, people expected it to be short term. It went into a rather longer term. And just when the world and people were beginning to think that we are probably seeing the end of it, it rears its head like a serpent again, and takes the wind out of us. So whether you want to call it COVID 1.0 or you want to call it COVID 2.0, but it is a reality. It has.
Yeah.
So Deepak, what has changed, both in terms of the traveler, customer, technology, and other, and how do you again see it changing?
So yeah, I look at, if you divide it between COVID 1.0 and 2.0, not fair to say that, but there are two parts to this for me. One is there is a human angle, and while it is nice to kind of romanticize about great innovations we are doing in the corporate world, etc. It has had a terrible effect on a lot of us. There are one side, there are those migrant labor kind of problems. Even outside of that, friends of mine who've lost jobs, economically in trouble, and all of those are, big stories that challenges that people have faced, which is really unfortunate. And to add to that, there is a lot of human resilience that we've seen as well. So that's one part of it. I know a lot of my friends who or people who used to work with me, sitting back and saying, hey, what do I do next? How do I reskill myself? I use the last bit of the money that I'd get for the rainy day, put that into new learnings, learn new things and get back, be ready for the post-COVID market. So that's something that we've seen with a lot of people. How do we reskill themselves? So I think the whole what's my job is going to be changing in between COVID 1 and COVID 2 is something that's very clear. The second thing is from a corporate
Your audio, Deepak.
Sorry, yeah. Sorry. I was saying there are two parts to it. One is how the government has supported, I'm focused on the travel hospitality industry, how the government kind of supported in COVID-1, at least for organizations like us, the MSMEs, while there was a lot of noise about what was the benefits, etc. At our level, we did not get any benefit from the government. So that was kind of unfortunate. So that led to a lot of pain with industries like ours, businesses like ours. And what happened with that also for me was what is called as the pandemic wall. That's the word that's being used now, is people who had left back in the organization to manage it during those days when it was just lights on kind of business, were overworked. So there was a lot of pressure on the people who had left out there, and they seem to be hitting those emotional barriers of tough job, working on salary cuts and all of that stuff. So I think that kind of for me were the negative aspects of what happened with COVID-1. People problem, organizational problems. What changed? What was innovations that companies used at that point in time? I mean, selfishly looking at my industry, there were, like you said earlier, it kind of fast-tracked a few things, but we have not seen drastic technology changes that have happened. I mean, look at, for example, touchless became a big deal. So yeah, touchless was there as part of our industry for a long time, but it kind of got speed at that for reasons best known. Hygiene and cleanliness became a big deal, and again, that was part of the business, but it had to happen, so it's just happened. The third thing which was interesting was cancellation policies. So across the industry, cancellation policies have become so much more better now from a consumer perspective. So I see these three things that happened. Apart from this, was there any big deal shift in terms of technology, etc.? I've not seen that happen between Feb, March 2020 to let's say September, October 2020. That's my take on COVID one. I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Um, However, when you look at COVID-2, I think that's the phase of innovation. So here we are today, while there is still the fear that, in India, probably outside India, there is a rampant spread of COVID that's happening. But we've kind of learned to live with it. I think as of today, there is vaccination and all that stuff. So that kind of everyone knows that here are the problems, and if you don't get to that, your life should be okay. So COVID-2 for me is about the convergence that's happened in some sense about how hotels, hospitality needs to market themselves. So today, I may be, a great property sitting in Goa or Missouri or Bangalore or wherever, but it's not about me marketing myself, which I've always been doing, but the convergence that's come into, is the government marketing me? Are public health services and departments marketing me? How are data scientists marketing me? How is the other industry marketing me? Is Bangalore travelable? Is Missouri travelable? Is Goa travelable? So all of that is converged to make selling that much more complex from a hotel perspective. And if you see, some small countries have done some great build some great solutions around it. And if you read, for example, Azerbaijan, they've come up with a policy. I think it's called Shaman or something like that, SHAMAN. Which is looking at how each hotel can look at all of these and build value for the customer from a public health, from hygiene, from what are precautions on COVID, etc., to grow the business internally for them. Dubai did some stuff like that. So some of that innovation is what countries are doing for their government, for their hotels. And with that, there is also very interesting to see, for example, how Google has now made the click free for hotels, which is interesting. So the jury is still out there to figure out, does it make sense for hotels to do it or not. TripAdvisor started a subscription model, $99, makes sense. That's great. There's a whole lot of industry that's evolved. I don't know if you're in touch with Chetan Kapoor and Viren. That's a very interesting model that they've started. There is Sherpa Solutions. I think it's US based. They do some COVID analytics and stuff. So those are some interesting innovations that you're seeing. And I think that's what I see between COVID-1 and COVID-2, which is one was about suffering, resilience, and ensuring that the water is below the nose. I think COVID-2 is about us fighting back with innovation and making sure that we know the limitations. What do we do next, and how do we do it effectively?
Right. If I may just add to your conversation on the accommodation space, and I even say pre-COVID-1, when we refer to hotels, it was always 4-star, 5-star, or okay, we went down to 3-star, later changed on to standardizations with OYO, and so on. And we had mushroom of such coming across. But what I see a change, of course, in a manner adding between COVID 1 and 2 is certainly the government of India, state accommodation, be it Maharashtra tourism, be it Karnataka tourism, rising up to the fact that today even their guest houses and circuit houses and accommodation needs to be marketed from a technology perspective. So therefore, I see them coming into the fray, adding to this whole mass of accommodation space. And suddenly, because earlier, let's face it, when you looked at how to market a property, you looked at, what are the train connections there? What are the flight connections there? How do we meet that? But suddenly, no, accommodation is far from it, because when people can drive to it, be it 1 hour, 2 hour, you're going into a rural accommodation and making it as an accommodation. So, well, accessibility is opening up that manner and change in consumer habit. So I would like to see visualizing that whether it be a 5-star or a rural homestay or a Maharashtra tourism guest house in Sindhu Darg, all need to be riding together on this one large platform for customers. And just to add the final part of it, Deepak, and because I want your reaction on it, it's not good enough to just be, if you're approaching that way, to be just riding on the accommodation only. You'll have to see the bus, you'll have to see the cab, you've got to see the air, all integrated into one seamless piece to be able to drive the benefits. What do you say in this whole?
Absolutely. So that's what I meant when I said that convergence has to be a lot more today, because, yeah, am I still comfortable traveling by train? So how is the destination marketing itself? So, yeah, I think all of that 360 has become so much more important today than it was earlier, and that'll be interesting to see how marketing evolves in that space.
Yeah, and let me also continue further. I was chatting up with a young girl who moved in from Europe, and her parents are part of a royal family in Orissa. And she says, I live in a 200-year-old property. And they, of course, converted it into 15-room property there. Now, the point here I'm making that with domestic tourism going the way it is, the heritage properties across have always thought to get the foreign tourists in. And certainly, if the domestic tourist is going to find value from staying in a palace or a smaller haveli, then I think somewhere this is age-old narration and stories, and the history of the place will need to be put forward, and the activities around it to be able to get the domestic interest going. What do you say to that?
Absolutely. So interesting, because when we were talking to our customers, this was August, September last year. In fact, you could still find that on our website. We actually created a questionnaire for them. So if they had a question to ask, they would come and ask us, and we would look for experts across the industry and get the experts to answer to hoteliers. So one of the things that we were telling hoteliers is, can you relook at the way you are breaking your customer personas? Okay, typically earlier you would look at a business traveler or couple on a romantic holiday or family or elders, etc. So we worked with them and we figured out those personas may not be relevant in this day and age, and we tried to make it a lot more relevant from that point of view. And we looked at how, for example, IATA did it. So I don't remember, so I've made some notes and I'll explain what we did. So for example, one of the customer who will never stop traveling is the impatient innovator. So this is the guy or the lady who can't sit at home and say, "Chalo yaar, kuch bhi hota hai. As long as the destination is nearby, I can drive, I will go." So how do we catch the impatient innovator, for example? How do I catch what is the young early majority? So this is the Indian demographic, whatever benefit. There are young guys who are willing to take a bike and go on a ride. How do we catch those guys? There are probably what I term the untroubled 55 plus, who have been there, done it, and say, okay, can we look at it? So is there a lazy last minute leisure traveler, or is there a last minute business traveler who has to travel? So can we break these personas and look at these type of travelers? Where do we catch them? Where does my hotel fit into attracting these kinds of customers and go to them? So that's something that we did. You could still find a lot of that study on our website, and
Right.
I hope it helped hotels.
Yeah, I mean, what you just said about young travelers is something which I have been very passionate to think that India has a great scope to bring under 30 brand for travelers, similar to what Contiki Holidays is in a global perspective. But if you look at under 30, there's a huge young population waiting to just hook up. I mean, if you look at Dharamveer Chauhan's hostel, he's developed almost 45 youth hostels, so to say, and they may be youth, but when you see the demographic, they're not youth. He's in there, they are 45 plus guys who are willing to enjoy, go there, sit on the bonfire night and strung a few guitars while they are at it. So coming back, I think there is a great demographic. Tourism and holiday just doesn't mean getting into stereotypes of going with the family, doing a certain things, because there are a whole lot of people who are wanting to do different things now. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Right. So where do we go from here, Deepak?
um, I mean, there are two ways of looking at it. Trip.com is coming with a 1.4 billion IPO in Hong Kong, right? So
Right.
life can't be bad. So there is future for us. So I'm not overtly worried about that. Um, so I think different people have kind of looked at it differently, and I'll tell you what we've done honestly. It was in the early days, kind of the pressure on us was, hey, we need to innovate. Hey, when things open up, the floodgates are going to open. If you are doing what you're doing now, you will become irrelevant and all of that stuff. But um, we we did take some of those probably rash decisions in those days to say, okay, we need to add this to our portfolio because this is going to happen and stuff like that. But end of the day, I think our learning was that if you're good at doing something, just focus on that. And I think that's what has held us to our stead. So after our couple of innovations that we tried, we added some new ideas into our portfolio. We said, no, let's just focus on what we're doing. So today, our product is so much more stronger, better than where we were, let's say in Feb 2020. And that's been appreciated by our customers. Uh, and this is the honest truth. Between March 2020 and December 2020, we doubled our customers. And I'm not exaggerating. So I don't think there was, of course, there was stress on revenues, etc. But I think if we are able to tell the story well, technology is required and customers would still come in. So for us, that's been kind of the underlying thing, that focus on what you're doing, and that's going to take us to the next level. Right. Apart from that, I think some of the things that we've tried to do is also, there are industries in trouble. We have largely focused on international customers. So 80%, 80+% of our revenues come from international business. So we've done pro bono work, for example, with BII, that's the British Inns Institute, or ASAP, which is the Service Apartments Association. So we said, hey, we don't mind putting in some bit of our effort to see how we could help you with analytics and stuff like that. And we hope that all of this will pay back to us when things get better. So some of these are bets that we put on the table to see how things would be. Apart from that, like I said, without repeating myself, we've just focused on what we want to do. So, and that's helped us.
Right. Before I finally move in on your opinion, certain opinions on the startup community, you of course have moved beyond a startup stage, but
Yes.
You've been there. But before I move, we know mobility is here to stay, mobile hand devices. It may only evolve further. I just read about Elon Musk trying to implant a chip in the brain to be able to have your phone talking about it. But that's not my conversation here. My conversation is, in the end, how many apps can your screen show? You can't keep downloading apps. And everybody who I come across and says, so we're building an app. So I want to ask him, who will download 50 apps on your screen? So the point here I'm trying to make, do you see a super app coming in, right? Do you see a WeChat or a WhatsApp or a Geo being able to offer one single app which connects all the dots in a seamless manner, in almost a what should I say, in a adapter and a technology plug in the wall. You plug it in the wall, suddenly the bulb lights up, right? You get electricity. So, I plug it into the super apps and suddenly I light up. How does that work?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So yes, I think there are a lot of large organizations which are already on that path, and it's a no-brainer that it has to happen. Yeah, like I think all of us on an average carry 50 plus apps on our mobile. So yeah, it has to happen.
Right.
There's no two
So,
ways about it.
right. So if this got to happen, then I lead into my final question with you on startups. Again, I have been extensively mentoring startups pro bono, literally, for the last 4 or 5 years, been part of
Yes.
even the MEDS Next program when MEDS launched it in Southeast Asia, doing it on my own independently. And of course, now we've sort of formed a startup mentor board. But again, the issue is I've always believed one thing, and Karthik here on the call would bear witness. I've said none of the startups will really, or even existing travel companies, would be able to work in isolation. They have to come into collaboration with each other, because
Yeah.
the large companies are not so, or medium companies are probably not so innovative, not so agile, not so fast moving, and the startups are innovative, they're quick moving, but they don't have the scale, they don't have the connectivity.
Yeah.
So if you expect them to be just raising money from the market to build up scale in the same manner, which could easily be available by plugging into existing ecosystem in some manner, right? But I haven't really succeeded despite connecting many over pre-COVID days. But suddenly when COVID comes in, I'm seeing more of this happening, of course, and it'll probably happen. The second part, when I say startup, and I'll throw it into you, the existing players, the next generation of entrepreneurs, and in the 80s and 90s, we know we had a breed of travel entrepreneurs who started their companies, but later on, somewhere in the 2000s, their kids didn't want to get into the industry because suddenly they thought travel wasn't a viable game because margin shrunk, and there were better innovation happening elsewhere to move in. Uh, and what I have seen, Deepak, I've seen people who have come in, if I may use the word outside, right, who's come in, who are well educated, IT driven, from IITs, etc., who suddenly found pastures in the travel industry, whereas existing people have thought there's no pasture here. How do you react to this startup system, and where do we go from here? What's your overall take on this?
Yeah, I remember a saying that my ex-boss used to say. He says, when you're a hunter in the forests of Africa, it's not the tiger or the lion that's in front of you that you need to be scared about. It's the one that's behind the bush that you don't see.
Right.
So I think all innovations have happened that way. And you know, the interesting thing, I'm talking purely from a travel technology perspective, is that there are two types of travel companies according to me. One is the travel company that has adopted technology, and then the other is the technology company that has adopted travel. And you've seen the latter being a lot more successful than the former to some extent, by bringing in technology and innovation. But having said that, yeah, of course there are the gen 2s in the from the legacy industries who are doing extremely well now, or catching up with them. So I think it should be a good mix. I mean, I wouldn't want to write them off. So they will definitely kind of hit back and come back again.
Again, I think COVID would probably make that happen. And like I made a statement the other day in one of the forums, somebody asked us, what is the profile of a CEO going forward in the industry? And CEO here doesn't necessarily mean CEO of Make My Trip. It could be CEO of the smallest company. I said your CEO has to be the best CTO, literally. So that's what my belief is, that it's not another department anymore in your organization and say somebody else is looking at it. It's the CEO who has to be the best CTO, and not necessarily the other way around. But that's the way I take this. Deepak?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So today, every decision that we take is based on technology. I think as Kepsla, for example, if I look at my spend over the last 3+ years, probably 70+% of that spend has been on technology, and not as much on marketing, because you know, cliche as it may sound, what's relevant 3 months back is completely irrelevant today. So it is that treadmill. You got to keep running at that pace. So technology cannot evolve. It has to move much faster. So um, we all of our energies go day in and day out to make sure that we are at the bleeding edge of technology, to use the word. So it can either cut you or cut the competition, right? So that's important for us completely.
Right. So Deepak Mavinkurve, always a pleasure to have you. Go enjoy the rest of your evening and continue to enjoy your coffee when it gets chiller. And over to Karthik. And Karthik, you have thoughts on that?
No, lovely hearing you. I was listening to you, Deepak, and your journey has been very inspirational. And I know from Ashish, I have heard about you multiple times, and we're interacted as well. So it's lovely to see you. And hopefully, once COVID gets over, we would love to come over and know more about Capsula in person with you. And hopefully, we'll catch up. Thank you so much again for being with us. Thanks, Ashish, as always. And thank you, our audience member, for joining in. We'll see you next week with our next guest. Thank you. Thanks again, Deepak.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Karthik. Thank you, Ashish. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.